Hi, everyone. Welcome to the ArtStation podcast. I'm co-host Kevin Strike, and I'm here with co-host Daniel Wade.
Hey, Kevin, great to be here.
Yes, so we've been looking forward to this podcast for a while.
We're not too proud to admit that we are space geeks.
So for space fans like Dan and I, we were lucky to be able to have the chance to talk to two astronauts on the podcast. The first one, Nicole Stott, who started her astronaut training in the year 2000, retired in 2015, but during that time spent 104 days in space. And some of those times she spent on the ISS, she was with our second guest, Robert Thirsk, who had a 28-year career as an astronaut, and during that time spent 204 days in space. So it was great to have them both on, and the fact that they'd both been on the ISS together made for some really great stories that they were able to tell. Also, Nicole Stott is an artist.
Yeah, that's right. Nicole's the first human being to paint a watercolor in space. She did a environment, obviously not in real time. The Earth was moving pretty quickly.
Yeah, it was really interesting to hear her talking about the specifics of painting in microgravity and what the differences there are with that. That was cool. And also, we talked a little bit about art and NASA and space and using art as a form of communication. And NASA's been doing that since the beginning. So that was fun to get into that. I think everyone will find that quite interesting. But also, not only are the astronauts in space doing a lot of great scientific and engineering experiments that are helping us here down on Earth, they also have a lot of experience with teamwork, team building, multicultural teams, dispersed teams, and that was great to be able to have those kind of conversations on this show as well.
Absolutely. I can't think of a more unique work environment than on the ISS.
Yeah, spinning around the Earth at the speed that they are and protected just by a very thin layer of metal and being able to come together as a team. So, some insights on selecting team members and traits, skills, dealing with conflict and being in very stressful situations and having to deal with that. So, a lot of great insights from both of them. I'm sure you're going to enjoy the conversation. You will learn about it too, and it have some fun at the same time too. So, let's get on with it. We hope you enjoy the conversation.
Would like this candle.
Nice. Hi, Nicole, Bob. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Great to be with you.
Happy to be here.
Right.
Bob on the moon.
Nice. Yeah, the first ever podcast from beaming down from the moon. That's all right.
First on ArtStation.
Just on ArtStation. So, Nicole, you painted the first watercolor in space. How did that come about, and what exactly was that like?
Well, I think it came about pretty indirectly. I'm very thankful to, and I think Bob will know Mary Jane Anderson. She was one of our flight crew equipment people, crew support on the ground. And she's one of those people that helps you get all of your stuff ready, to take with you. And as far as personal items go, we got this little, kind of little duffel bag, kind of cosmetic bag, almost size thing that we could take some personal stuff with. And at the time, all I was thinking about was, the little stuffed animal for my son, my husband's, cross pen or something, things from your family and friends that you want to bring with you to share the experience. And she reminded me, I'm very thankful that I would be spending months on the station and that I should think about something that I like doing down here on Earth that I could bring with me to space. And she said, it's got to be small and we got to approve it, but let me know. And so I just had this little watercolor kit at home. I thought, I'll paint in space. I like painting down here. I'll paint in space. And that's really all it was at the time. And very thankful for the experience. I'm very thankful to my crewmate and friend Bob here too, who took the one and only picture that exists of of painting in space as well. But as you can imagine, microgravity is this interesting environment and adventure on its own. Keeping track of your stuff is probably the most difficult thing there with everything floating. So, I painted watercolors. You don't have a cup of water to dip your brush in. It was like little floating balls of water that I would squeeze out of the drink bag, and discovered it was kind of a cool way to show, which is why I wish I would have videotaped it too, to show kind of the physics of living in space too, because I noticed, different things about the way the water wanted to move onto the end of the brush, and the way the water moved around the end of the brush and then transferred over to the paint, and all of these things that were just very different to what painting on Earth is like. And then of course there's no plein air painting in space, right? As far as I know, because as you're looking out the window, traveling at 17,500 miles an hour, or about 5 miles a second around the planet, what you'd want to paint out the window is gone before you could get your brush to the paper. So printed out a picture of what I like and painted at night before going to bed outside my crew compartment. Yeah.
What
Great.
was the what was the response once you had actually produced that artwork? When when everybody saw that, like what was your feedback on that?
Yeah, well, I'll just tell you, everything I do artistically is experimental. So anybody who knows me would not have been expecting, some grand piece of fine art. But everybody was really excited about it, because I think, and that's people I know and people I didn't know, and not because, the quality of the painting, or whether they liked it or not, but more because they were like, wow, we can make this. My dog jingling over there. We can make this connection to this experience you had in space through this artwork, that you're trying to convey what you saw through the window and that kind of thing. And I think it's neat that as human beings, I kind of look at it like we're putting the human in human space flight, right? By doing things like that. Mm-hmm. And, as human beings, since the beginning of spaceflight, we've been doing these kinds of things, whether it's, and Bob always likes to think about the music that's happening up there, that, since the beginning of time, we've been through Alexei Leonov painting, and people want to be creative. And if you weren't a photographer before you got to space, you become one, because you want to capture those memories, not just for yourself, but, for everyone else that you want to share it with too.
Sure.
I remember that evening when Nicole was painting, and I dropped by and I watched her for a little bit, and she just described some of the the physics problems of painting in space. So I was intrigued by that and watched that. But I can't remember, Nicole, but I think it might have been a wave that you were painting, and that struck me as well. One of my findings during long duration flight is that we also need to have connections with Earth as well. So I sort of thought, well, you're probably painting something that helps you to connect with Earth. I think that's so important. So I also think that artwork in space is important because it keeps us connected with Earth. I remember another experience with Nicole, and that is that she and I attended some animal and plant biology experiments. I think the investigators, the chief scientists, wanted us to check in on the animals once per week for protocol. But I think she and I checked every day. And I think it was partly just our desire to connect with Earth. Living aboard a spaceship is not like living at a 5-star hotel. It's pretty rustic. Mm-hmm. And any connection that we have through painting, through art, through music, she and I shared music, similar tastes in music as well, and animals and plants as well. That's very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Now, NASA's been using art to communicate with the world for a long time. It's something that's part of probably communicating, the adventure with the rest of the world, and also even the artwork that you're selecting for your mission badges and things like that.
Yeah, I think that like every human being, all astronauts, although we come from a science and tech background, have an appreciation for art. And you're right, Kevin, it's a wonderful way to communicate, the techiness of the missions that we're on with the broader community. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to take a minute here to share with you my mission patches. I think you'll enjoy that. So in the background behind me, you see the patch from my ISS expedition. This is a patch that I wore on my flight suit. It was designed by a dear friend from Prince Rupert, British Columbia, a member of the Tsimshian Nation. His name is Bill Helene. I met with Bill several months before launch, and I explained to him the objectives of our ISS expedition, and if he could use some of the motifs, some of the stylized artistic elements from the Pacific Northwest Indian culture to depict the mission. So he did a great job. He depicted the space station as a thunderbird. And truly enough, if you look down on the space station from up above, it does look like a bird of prey. So the imagery features the solar arrays of the space station, the thermal radiators. The top part represents the forward part of the station, and the little tuft of hair on the back end of the Thunderbird's head represents the Canadarm2. Then the bottom part of the imagery represents the Russian segment of the space station. That's depicted with a bear symbol as well. One other thing you'll notice is that the Thunderbird is actually gazing off into the distance at the moon. And we hope that some of the research and development work that we do as a crew aboard the space station will enable us someday to venture back to the moon and on to other destinations in deep space. That's a badge that I wore in my flight suit, and very proudly, and yeah, it's very popular. It's just one of many examples of how we can use art, music, poetry, writing, video, to share the adventure. Nicole and I were privileged and honored to represent our countries aboard the space station, but it's something that we want to communicate to the public at large. Space exploration is a wonderful undertaking for human beings to do, and we need to share it.
And it's cool, you know, just follow. I love the way Bob made like this personal connection. I think both culturally and, you know, and personally, and then bringing in somebody else, sharing the mission by, you know, really inviting this artist to create this artwork for him. And, you know, we both got our shirt on with our Expedition 21 patch that I believe Lena was the main instigator in the design of this patch, which really tried to represent as best as possible all of the people involved, the spacecraft involved, you know, just kind of the history and legacy of the station program as well. And so it becomes a very, you know, a very personal connection to the mission for us too. But we want, you know, anybody who knows about our mission to see it as well. And I love what you said too, Kevin and Dan, that you know, that NASA has been doing this forever. I think all of the agencies really have in one way. And Japan has been especially creative with experiments actually that incorporate art into the design of the experiment too. But I just think it's so cool that these space agencies have been using and inviting artists, integrating them into the technical community from the very beginning to share, not just like, oh, isn't this cool? These guys are in the suit up room, but really sharing, chronicling the history of the program through the art that's done.
One of the things I noticed in my sort of research was that Norman Rockwell was involved in painting, you know, some of those early Mercury and Apollo missions, and NASA lent him a spacesuit for reference, which is very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's as you were talking as well too. There's so much that can be captured in a visual image as part of the artwork that can capture so many different meanings. And as Bob, you were describing with the patches, it's unique to the visual art. All right, I'd like to chat a little bit about building teams, and both of you have spent time together in space, also have helped to select team members to go there. What are some of the qualities that you look for in creating such a dream team?
You know, there certainly are some technical skills that you're looking for in people to be selected as astronauts and then get assigned missions. The technical skills you probably are aware of. So it's, you know, robotic skills, spacewalking skills, repair skills, maintenance skills, assembly skills, rendezvous and docking. You know, but as I get older and towards the end of my career, I'm thinking that the non-technical skills are every bit as important for an astronaut as those technical skills. When I say non-technical skills, I'm talking about personality traits. So I'm talking about self-care, teamwork, group living, followership, leadership, cross-cultural skills. And I would go so far as to say that the difference between a good astronaut and a great astronaut or mastery of those non-technical skills. And the ones particularly for space flight that are important, I think, are teamwork, group living, self-care, self-management as well. So, making sure that you have the reserves to endure a 6-month expedition, that you don't blow all your energy, all of your passion in the first month or so, and then, be depressed and lethargic for the rest of the flight. Play in the sandbox well together with your other crewmates. Make sure that their objectives are just as important as your objectives, which means to be helpful. And to be aware of your own behaviors that might annoy or irritate other people. What's most important to me are the mission objectives. It'd be terrible for an astronaut crew to come home and not accomplish all the mission objectives. So I'll do whatever it takes. I'll comb my hair the other way if it upsets someone, in order that we achieve our mission objectives and that we have a happy crew.
And you know what, Bob just said that he'd comb his hair the other way. And, I can attest to the fact that he would. If I was floating by him every day and I decided that, Bob, you need to part on the other side, he, just the subtle hint of it would have, and what's great is that he would have done it without being like, oh, Nicole, I don't want to part my hair on the other side. It would have been something that would have, come from him. And I love it. We some of the pictures that we take in space are for the fun, right? You want to enjoy your time there. And I think we've talked about, Bob and I have at least, this kind of question before of, what are the traits you want to see in crew members? And by the time somebody gets to the interview process, somebody else has already said, okay, their college work satisfies, their career work satisfies, whatever the basic medical stuff is already satisfied. But you're really sitting across from these people and kind of looking at it from the standpoint of, would I want to spend 6 months in a relatively confined space doing, critical work in an extreme environment, with this person? Has the experience they've had, really been about more than just the school and the work, but about how they can utilize that to do good things, to make life better for, for everyone else around them. And I just always throw in, well, they put the torque wrench back to 0, after they've used the tool. I mean, those kind of just things that just need to be natural about them. And so you want to know this person as a human. And so are you going to enjoy your time there with them? You need to be able to enjoy your time there with them throughout the work, throughout the play, as Bob is showing. And then you also need to know and trust that these people will have your back, and that they trust that you'll have theirs when, it's hitting the fan, when things aren't going as planned, because they absolutely will not always go as planned. And that, I think, builds such a strong partnership, a strong team, a strong crew, which is what we want to be. And Bob has a picture up of one of our, I will just say it, like, laugh till you almost pee your pants kind of evenings on space station.
So our crew was on orbit for
Yeah.
October 31st, Halloween. And crew members like Nicole and I from the United States and Canada well know what Halloween and the traditions of Halloween are all about, but our European and our Russian crewmates did not. So we took the time to explain that for Halloween, we all should dress up in some outrageous costume and at least take a photograph that we could send down to the ground. So during earlier in that day, we all scrounged around the lockers and the stowage areas of the space station to find something that we could use to make a costume. And you can see that all of us are wearing something pretty outrageous, and we've all got big goofy grins on our face. We really enjoy this. About 5 seconds after we took this photograph, Mission Control from Houston calls up, and they said, Space Station Houston, for the commander, an emergency situation. And I was closest to the radio communication panel, so I picked up the microphone and I looked at Frank, who you can see here is on the far right here. He's got a striped shirt on, got some shady glasses on, and he's got his wrist bound together as though he's wearing handcuffs. His costume design is to be a convict. And I looked at Frank and I looked at the radio and I said, Houston, I'm sorry, but the commander is tied up at the moment. So Houston said, no, Bob, this is a real emergency situation. We really need to speak to the commander. So Nicole grabbed the microphone and held it up close to Frank's mouth. And I took a notebook and I took the notes that from the conversation with Houston. But everyone in the background was just laughing their heads off. And even though this was an emergency situation, a serious situation, I was really worried that the ground was thinking that we'd all gone schizo, something was wrong with us. I called down the next day to explain the situation. But that was a moment of hilarity. And it's so important every few days to have a silly, crazy, wild moment like this. It helps.
Yeah, I guess I'm guessing that figuring that out amongst the personalities is more about spending a lot of time with the individuals and people that and you can only kind of assess that through a length of time.
Well, I think, I think there is the length of time associated. And of course, whether you like it or not, it's a long training cycle for any space flight, right? And so, Bob, I think it was almost 3 years of like concerted training together in preparation for expeditions 20 and 21, and that's traveling around the world together as well. But I think in addition to that time, and training like you're going to fly, like actually in the simulators and the trainers, really behaving like you believe you would when you're in space, right? And, that's key. But I think there has to be, like amongst the people, there has to be a deliberateness too, kind of a diligence to say, okay, we're going to proactively consider the fact that things aren't always going to be peachy cheery all the time, right? Somebody might wake up and just not feel good. Somebody might end up getting tired, throughout the day, has too many tasks stacked on them. And we all, there's the self-care, but there's also, in each of us is this, okay, we've got to do everything that, we were assigned to do. And you have to be willing to allow somebody to help you. You have to be willing to ask for help, but you also have to be willing, like Bob was the master of, was to watch your crewmates and really have this awareness of, maybe they're struggling, or maybe, they've just got too much going on, or they're just not feeling good, and to pick that up for them. I have a picture. I wish I would have thought to bring it, but Bob, remember when we were we had these pictures we were trying to share with our physical trainers on the ground, that we were staying in shape. And so we got in front of the exercise equipment. We were doing this, it was like a gun show. We were really like pumping up the,
Hans and Franz.
Oh my gosh, it was hysterical. And Roman Romanenko, who was one of our Russian crewmates, is possibly one of the funniest human beings I've ever met in my entire life. And so every picture we took there, and in addition, in those Halloween, there was a series of the Halloweens too. He's got there's like a different face pose, in the whole thing. But then we ended up going into a module, and like all 5 of those guys got up on my shoulders, right? And so I got to where it was like I was just holding on by 1 foot, under a foot rail, and I've got all 5 of these guys, and big smiles and everything. And then ended up having my birthday on station, and one of our other crewmates, Max Sarayev, posted something with that picture that I think reflects what we all did for each other. I mean, he was pointing me out because it was my birthday, but it's something that I felt from every single one of those people that were there, was that, sometimes there's going to be days where just one of the crew members is really going to have to carry the load for the whole crew, and has to be willing to do that, and has to be willing to talk to the ground too and say, hey, we're just not going to do these things today. We're going to push that off till tomorrow, or we're going to do it later than planned, and still achieve all the milestones, but be not just taking care of myself as an individual, but really collectively taking care of the health and well-being of the crew too. And that's a great group of people to be with.
Kevin, your point about making the effort to get to know your crewmate and their personality traits and their likes and dislikes, I think is really, really important. A good example of that is, like Nicole and I lived in Houston together for many years, but she was in a different astronaut class than me, so we hadn't done a whole lot of training together beforehand. So we asked if we, and during our expedition, we're going to do a very major robotics task together. So we asked for extra training sessions together, and that allowed us to get to know each other's style and get to know each other. Another crewmate, Frank DeWinna, he's a European astronaut. I hadn't really trained a whole lot with him before in the past. So the same thing, I asked for extra training sessions with him, and then we socialized a lot. I think all of our families got to know each other, them together as well. So over 3 years, we had the opportunity to get to know each other, our styles, our preferences. I think that has made a whole lot of difference.
Another thing, just following on from what you were saying, working with people from other countries, particularly the Russians, I understand you guys did Russian language training as well. Like, how did that go?
I'll just say, people ask, what was the most difficult thing about astronaut training? I'm like, raise your hand for that one. Absolutely. Learning to speak Russian was the most difficult thing that I can think of with astronaut training. I'm so thankful that the official language on the space station was English, right? But we had to learn Russian because the Soyuz spacecraft was, and like for Bob, it was his way to and from the station for that flight. But the Soyuz was and still is the rescue vehicle on board of the space station. And so in that vehicle, the instrument panels are in Russian, the procedures are in Russian, the ground team you're going to speak to is going to be in Russian. And so you have to, at a minimum, be able to operate safely, comfortably in that. But I just think, holy moly, that was the most difficult thing I ever did.
It was absolutely the most difficult aspect of training for me. And, considering that, we learned how to spacewalk and we did winter survival and all that, which was difficult, Russian language training was probably the most difficult for me. But I'll also say that it's probably one of the most important things to do as well. When you speak to the ground in Moscow, you must speak Russian because there's no one there that's going to respond to you in English. So it's required. And perhaps even more important, it's good for crew bonding as well. Whenever I had the opportunity to speak to a Russian crewmate in my baby language that I speak, I made the effort to speak in Russian. It's a courtesy thing. It's a way of showing respect for someone's background, for their culture. Just to segue, Dan, I think that making that effort to respect another person's culture is so important. You have to avoid the thinking that your country, your nation, your culture is God's gift to the world. Canada is a pretty well-respected country in the world, but we don't do things perfectly. So it's important to make sure that you listen to what other countries are doing, their approaches to problem solving, to team building, to space operations, and just keep your ears open. It's really helpful.
Yeah, and I thought you were going to go here too, Bob, is that I look at what we've done, the collective we, on the International Space Station. I mean, I don't think you could find a better example of a truly complex, endeavor that has been peacefully, successfully implemented, 20 years now? I mean, longer than my son's been alive. We've had representatives from these 5 different space agencies, 15 different countries, working together on this mechanical system, that we built to mimic what Earth does for us naturally, right? And up there, we're acutely aware of how much CO2 is in our atmosphere, how much clean drinking water we have, the integrity of the thin metal hull, all of that stuff that is so perfectly analogous to our life here on this planet. And I think it's just absolutely, when you agree, like, we as a crew agreed on how we were going to behave together. The space station program across these 5 different agencies and 15 countries agreed on this mission, this greater mission, right? That of purpose. And then once you have that, I think that's like this driver that then really allows you to focus on the common ground, on those things that we all really, value, with respect to life and supporting life and making life better. And I'm just always hopeful that people will learn more about the space station from that standpoint too. Technical masterpiece, beautiful work of art hanging there in space, falling around the planet, 16 times a day. But those partnerships that were put in place, that international team, that's what, Bob, tens of thousands of people across, terrestrially here working together that way. It's so impressive on every level.
Yeah, it would serve as a great learning tool for that kind of like international cooperation and as you said, once agreeing on the main objectives and then working with each other and relying on each other's strengths to accomplish that mission would be so helpful in so many of the probably the most important issues facing our planet.
Yeah.
We're only about 400 kilometers above the Earth's surface,
Yeah.
so we do not see, the Earth out our window as a entire sphere. But you certainly do get the impression, looking out the window down on Earth, that it's a precious, vulnerable, fragile ecosystem out there in the vast, inky black of space. And it wouldn't take much to wipe out civilization on Earth, an asteroid or a nuclear accident, something like that. And for the first week or two, I was very aware that I was Canadian, that I was representing Canada during this international mission. But after a few months, that notion of national citizenship goes to the back of my brain, and I really felt like I was a member of humanity, a member of civilization. And it really gives you a perspective on what the important things in life are. It's inequalities, it's poverty, it's environmental damage, those things. It's not the affairs of the Kardashian family. And what I would like to do, just following up on what you said, Kevin, is if we can have all the major decision makers on our planet go up to space just for 3 days, do nothing except look out the window and reflect on who you are, your family, your country, your planet, the future of humanity. And then they can go back home. I think that it will be a very pivotal moment for them, and it would change the way that they perceive priorities on the planet.
It's, Bob, I love that you said that, because I think there's, I'll just tell you guys, I look at what goes on within the tools that you make available to artists and stuff. And to me, there's, it's so complex to me. There's like this, I see like awe and wonder in the, in the tools that you provide for artists to be able to create like their masterpieces, right? And I see that in the space station as well, and what it's allowed us to do there on the space station, but also how Bob just described, how it allows us to look, back at home and gain a new perspective. And I think the art that people do, regardless of what their tools are, it's really about providing somebody with a new perspective on some story or some mission. But I love that in all of that, there really is this underlying complexity. And yet, when we talk about, when somebody asks, okay, well, what did you learn from, flying in space? I mean, if I have to bring it down to the very basic level of what I learned, it's simple stuff. I mean, it's stuff I knew when I was in kindergarten, right? It's like, look out the window. Oh, holy moly, I live on a planet. I knew that before, before I flew to space. But how often do we think about, oh, I'm on a planet, I live on a planet, that we're all earthlings, like Bob just described. You can still, be proud of your country. You can still maintain a culture that's different on these different places on the planet, but this acknowledgement that we're all sharing the same home that's a planet. And then, oh my gosh, that just like on our space station, that like veil thin blue line of atmosphere that wraps the planet. It's like, it's stunning. And I mean, I know I stand on the ground now and I try to every day think, I live on a planet. I go put my feet in the dirt. I make that connection. I like viscerally think about it and look up. And when you look up, it looks like it goes on forever, like the blue goes on forever. But right. I would get to the outside of the atmosphere driving up before I would get to Mickey's Wonderland, Walt Disney World, the Magic Kingdom from here. I'd be out of the atmosphere sooner. And I think that's just that should inspire awe in everyone
Mm.
and respect for, each other and this, very special life support system that's been provided to us that we haven't found anywhere else yet, Bob, as far as I know.
That's interesting because when I think about the ISS, I think about, oh, you just have that basically thin protection between you and an empty space. I don't think about that when it comes to Earth, but you've seen it. It's that thin blue line that you talk about, and seeing that with your own eyes, and then you can realize that it's just as fragile as you've been just saying.
But you don't have to
mm,
go to space. I am sorry to
right,
interrupt
yeah,
you, but I mean, just like 2 cents. What I really want people to know
yeah,
is that you don't have to go to space to understand that, to feel it, to get it in your heart and your mind, for it to become part of you. Um, I mean, in this isolation that we've all been going through, I find myself like every day, like I'm looking out, I'm very fortunate to live on this intercoastal canal. And it's like the light is shining on the way the water is moving. It's just really reflecting in this beautiful way. And if I sit there long enough, actually not long at all, I'm like, wow, how does that happen? Where's that light? I mean, there is awe and wonder around us everywhere. And, to me, there's no better way than planting your feet in the dirt and looking up at the sky or at space at night to kind of make that real for you. But I want people to understand they don't have to travel. I highly recommend it. I think Bob would highly recommend it. I think all four of us should go back as a crew would be good. Let's all go. Let's find a way. But you don't have to do that to have this feeling.
Yeah. One of the things that I've discovered in Canada, we have these Indigenous nations across the country. And they certainly exemplify the fact that you don't have to go to space in order to appreciate nature and our place in it. They have this natural understanding that everyone in the world is connected. Nature is connected with humanity. The flora and the fauna are connected with the ocean and with the freshwater cycle and the atmosphere as well. And that if you make a perturbation in some place in your environment, it's going to have a ripple effect elsewhere. I certainly saw that when I was up in space. You can see how the elements of the natural ecosystem are interconnected from that vantage point in space. But the Indigenous peoples in Canada, they figured that out hundreds of years ago. We should be listening to them a little bit more. You don't have to go to space. Get out to the outdoors, look up at the stars at night on a clear night. That will help set the right mind frame as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'd like to switch gears to be talking a little bit about stressful environments. And when I think about the ISS, it definitely like life and death is kind of right in front of you there. A lot of our listeners and experience what we call crunch time, like these times close to the end of a release of a game or a film where there's intense pressures. So with the pressures that you've experienced being on the ISS or other projects, what have been your kind of ways to manage those intense periods in the best possible way?
Well, the intense periods occur in any profession, whether you're in the gaming and video industry or whether you're an astronaut, any profession. Those moments of intensity and peak performance and stress come through all the time. My most important lesson to pass on is that it's what you do before those moments occur that help you prepare and give you the reserves to excel during the stressful times. We had a commander, his name was Gennady Padalka. He is Russia's long duration spaceflight veteran. I think he's done 5 or 6 long duration space flights. And I like to think that one of the reasons why Russia continually keeps flying him all the time is because his performance is so high during those stressful times. And Nicole and I had the opportunity to watch him, and he was a master at pacing himself during the quiet times, quiet days on orbit. He'd always make sure that he took time to socialize, to eat properly, to get his exercise in every day, so that when those crises did occur on orbit, an emergency EVA or the delay of a cargo vehicle launch, or whenever the shuttle was docked to the station, it was always madness, crazy, aggressive schedule. He had the reserves then. We're all going to be subject to those stressful periods, but it's your ability to manage yourself, to manage your stress and take care of exercise, diet, and well-being that will allow you to soar like an eagle when those high performance intervals come.
Ditto.
Yeah.
What else to
Pacing
say?
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and thankfully on the station we have the facility to take care of ourselves, and they've planned those things into our day for us, right? And I was so thrilled to see that all of my crewmates were diligent about that kind of thing. We're, and I use Frank as an example. He'll tell you what's the way he says it, Bob. He says, I'm not a real fan of sport on the ground. He's not the guy that you would find in the gym all the time, just on his own as the thing that he enjoys doing. But he knew absolutely that in space, to stay healthy there, to maintain a mental wellness too on the station, that he needed to do that exercise as planned. And he was like this wonderful example of what you need to do to take care of yourself when you're in space, even though it might not be the favorite thing that you would do on Earth. And so having that exercise time planned for us and using it, I loved with our crew. I don't know that all crews do this, but we always, if we could, try to have our meals together, and offload a little bit. We were solving the world's problems. We were speaking Rusglish or, Ranglish, whatever you want to, floating around the dinner table, sharing, food from all of our different bonus packs and stuff. And those kind of just, things that you're not really thinking about it. Oh, I'm doing this because it's for my wellness and I'll have the reserves when I, really, it hits the fan. But it's just, I don't know, it's just this natural kind of comforting way to be ready then. And then when something does happen, oh my gosh, I was so pleased to see how when the depressurization alarm is going off at 3:00 in the morning and everybody is floating out of their crew compartments and just rallied like we trained, just behaved in a way, diligent, deliberate, not freaking out, the adrenaline is working for good and coming together and solving the problem until you knew it wasn't one anymore. And that's a nice thing to know, both in yourself that you're capable of doing that, but that as a team, you'll work together to make something like that happen. In an environment, like you said, it's like how thick, Bob, like, that's how thin the whole of the, the space station is between you, is like you said, Kevin, that deadly vacuum of space. So it requires that on behalf of yourself and everyone.
So I wasn't aware of that, but are you saying that there are times at 3 a.m. where an alarm goes off that's like a potentially deadly issue?
Yes.
Wow.
I think what was it, Bob? We had when the STS-129 crew was there, the shuttle crew that was bringing me home. This was probably I think the most interesting emergency alarm that went off when, that I remember when I was there. So we have this crew, 6 people docked to the station with us. They're preparing, they have several spacewalks, EVAs that they're going to be doing while they're docked with us. And on the night, one of the things that we used to do to prepare crew members to go out on a spacewalk is they would get locked in the airlock overnight, and we would bring the pressure down a little bit so that the nitrogen is getting out of their body. Bob can describe this much better than me, but it allows them to prepare to go out in space when they're just going to be inside of the spacesuit. And so 2 guys are in the Randy and Mike were in the airlock preparing for, sleeping, ready for the spacewalk the next day. And middle of the night, this alarm goes off. And we all come out. Of course, the shuttle crew now comes over from the shuttle onto the station. So there's 10 of us there. And then part of the alarm like rapidly repressurizes the airlock so that the hatch can be opened and you can get, the guys out safely. They, I think, slept right through. We had to open the hatch for them. They're like, what's going on? Is it morning already? But all the rest of us, but you're rallying. And it was so cool to see, because we not only had to respond to what I believe was telling us there was a depressurization, like the air, was spewing out somewhere. Thankfully it wasn't, but we had to respond to that. And then we had to make sure that those 2 guys were, taken care of, that they were healthy when they came out. And then think about, okay, how do we correct this in a way that we can get back on track for them to safely go out the next day. And we had to completely revamp that. And then for everybody to go back to bed and actually be able to sleep, you know, when your adrenaline is jacked up that high. But it was so cool to see how it came together between the work of the crew members on board the station and the team on the ground supporting us, you know, every step of the way too. Yeah. But yeah, the 3 o'clock in the morning ones were interesting.
One other comment about those stressful periods as well. Be aware that your behavior or your personality that you exude during those stressful periods affects the other members of the team as well. So if you're looking stressed, if you're irritable, it's going to be a feed forward kind of situation, and you're going to impact the other members' well-being as well. I'm going to throw a kudo at Nicole, and I'm going to say that she's the master at maintaining a very pleasant and upbeat personality, even on those tough robotics, those tough spacewalk days when the alarm goes off at 3 in the morning. Whenever I passed Nicole on the station throughout the day, and we'd pass each other 5 or 6 times during the day, she'd always stop. She'd have a smile on her face. She'd make a comment on, I don't know, the shirt that I was wearing, or ask how I was feeling that day, or ask how the family is doing. And that really boosts my morale. That boosts my state of mind, so that I approach the next task a little bit more positive. And I think Nicole is a master at that, and that's a good lesson to pass on as well to your team members who have to perform when these deadlines come up. Be aware that your behavior and your outward outlook impacts the other members of the team.
Well, you know, I'm going to thank you for that, Bob, but I'll tell you what, I felt like I was surrounded by that with our crew. I really did feel like that was just, that there really was this, not forced either. I never felt like anybody's like, oh, I have to ask Nicole how she's doing today. You know, it wasn't like that. It was just like this kind of natural flow of how we interacted with each other. It was a very uplifting, you know, kind of thing. I mean, I think we all realized we are in a really special place, right? You know, this opportunity of where we were and what we were doing. And, you know, Bob mentioned this robotic thing. I mean, we had the chance to grab with the Canadian arm, you know, grab the first Japanese cargo free flying vehicle. It was coming up, it was doing, you know, and when you train for that, you know, Bob, remember that training? I mean, every single time you're training for that, they never gave you a normal, like nominal, it's approaching nicely, you get to grab it. I mean, it's spinning out of control, you know, the arm's got a problem, whatever it was. So all of this training you've done is hugely stressful getting ready for that. And so I don't know about you, Bob, but in my mind, that's all I was thinking the whole time I'm doing this thing is, okay, when's it going to start spinning out of control? When am I going to have to really be aggressive? And I think one of the things I realized is how well we as human beings can temper ourselves, can not ignore when something is stressful, but we can really manage, you know, what we need to be doing in those stressful situations. And we can rally and successfully complete the task. And then once it was done, I mean, I don't even think I realized how much I felt loaded by this, you know, this task we had to do, that once we were done, the thing's all captured, we've pushed the buttons to make sure it's safe. I mean, I looked down and I had to push like a couple other buttons on the computer just to get to another screen or something. And I looked and my hands were like doing this like shaky thing. And I remember, you know, Mike Barrett was next to me, one of our other crewmates. And I'm like, Mike, what's up with that? And he's like, yeah, that just happens. And I'm like, oh, dude, you know, that'd be nice to know that just happens. And, you know, this is like, wow, it's like this release now, you know, it was safe. It was okay. My body could do that. I could, you know, high five Bob with the woohoo. And it was cool to go that way. But just how we can, I mean, human being, we are amazing. The way we can adapt and do, you know, just in all of these situations is really incredible.
I don't think that's an innate ability. I think that's an acquired ability. And unfortunately, we have to go through a lot of trials and tribulations to develop that ability to maintain an even keel, or I think the word is equanimity, you know, coolness under pressure. You unfortunately just have to go through that. You know, you're talking about the robotics task. I made all kinds of mistakes, all kinds of failures on the ground, trying to learn the skills to do that. But it went okay on orbit. And
It went really well.
thanks to the training, thanks to the support team. Yeah.
I think one of the things I really liked you mentioned previously was that you making mistakes on the ground. So that you do all that heavy lifting on the ground, so that when you're up in space, you're ready for those, eventualities.
I remember Bob, it's so funny. I just have to remember Elizabeth Horton,
Yeah.
one of our HTV, this is the cargo vehicle. She was one of our main robotics instructors. And I remember doing, this training, and where you would, until you knew how to keep that arm in sync, and, and Frank was really good at flying, at flying the arm that way. He should have been the one doing the task. But it was interesting how you could almost see the mistake coming too. Like you could feel like, okay, this is not going the way it should. And I remember with Elizabeth, I would always be like, "Mommy, mommy," it'd be like, "Mommy, mommy," like, oh, darn, it's like, okay, I learned that one now. So, yeah.
But if you're going to be an astronaut or any professional, you really have to be comfortable with making mistakes. You have to be comfortable with failure. It's the way that I learn. I make a mistake and I make sure that it never happens again. That's just the way that I train in life.
Yeah,
you know what's part of that? I'm interrupting you again, Kevin. Sorry. You know what's part of that is, like, I think it's one of the philosophies that kind of underlies doing really incredible things like that, like being able to have that space station in space, being able to get there safely and live there and come home safely and do all those complex things, is that even though in preparing, we know we're going to screw up. We know it's absolutely a given. It's like I try to tell my son, you don't know how to play baseball until you actually practice and play baseball, right? Everyone is not the natural that gets up there and just can hit the bat because they were born with it, right? And I think about it like, we have this philosophy, here's how we can, not why we can't, that kind of thing. And that underlying all of that, even though we know we're going to screw up in that training, with the idea that it prepares us not to screw up in space, we go into it with the idea that there is a solution. There is a way for us to do this successfully. And we're believing that as we're going through, yelling for mommy in the training session, because we know that that's there to help us get to that place.
Yeah, it seems like it's come up a few times of learning from mistakes is so helpful. And I've heard you talk about before the importance of project debriefs and how you go through that. I found it particularly interesting. Maybe you can just share a little bit about how those sessions go and what's the most helpful.
Well, again, to be an astronaut, you have to have a thick skin, which means that you have to be able to take constructive criticism on a regular basis. Certainly after a space mission or a space station expedition is over, we will spend, Nicole, not days, but I think weeks, maybe a couple of months, debriefing every single aspect of the mission, every system, electrical power, thermal control, robotics, EVA, and also our crew tasks as well. And we find out what went right, mistakes that we made, and we verbalize that, and we make recommendations for follow-on missions, how training could be improved, how mission management could be improved, how we can improve by better coordination with amongst the crew and also with the team on the ground. But it's not just after missions. We train on the ground. As I said a minute ago, during my training, I've made all kinds of mistakes. We have training sessions several times a week, and no training session is over until you sit down with your instructor for 15 or 30 minutes. And again, go through what went right and what didn't go so well. And by learning from those mistakes, we keep taking our performance to a higher and higher level, so that once we are launched, once we are ready to perform, when it counts, our performance level is at a perfect or an excellence level. So for me, making mistakes, failure is part of what I do, but even more important is the debrief and the lessons learned and the best practices that I've picked up. It's made me a better astronaut, actually made me a better person.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because a lot of what they're trying to do with us, when you get back from mission, they're thinking about the next mission, right? And they want to put something in place from, our experience, okay, so Nicole screwed that up. Let's make sure that, Mike, who's on orbit now, doesn't have to go through that same thing. Let's put something in place with the procedures, with the communication, with another training session, whatever it is that keeps, the next person from having to, go through that same mistake. There's all kinds of other things out there that, that we can experience. So, to help make things better that way. And I think, like Bob said too, this having this thick skin, being able to take in that criticism in a positive way. And I know, it was rare to have somebody that was just blatantly, obnoxiously trying to bring you down. I mean, the 99.9999 whatever percent of the time, the people we had surrounding us were really trying to make sure. I mean, our mission was their mission as well. And so, I always try to, I remember Elizabeth as well with this, with the robotics training. I was like, Elizabeth, I won't cry in front of you. So, tell me what I need to, really tell me what I need to know. Please don't, because there was a little bit of this aura of, this like, oh, it's the astronaut. Sometimes I couldn't, photography was one of those things. Remember that, Bob? Like, I wanted to know if I was sending pictures to the ground that were CRAP that could have been adjusted by just tweaking something on the camera. I don't want to wait until after I get back 3 months later to find that out. I want to know while I'm in space. And so it was almost like you had to give every mission controller, every instructor permission to let you know if you were, doing something not quite right. I'm like, please tell me, I won't cry in front of you.
Interesting. I've found it. I've heard you mention before that another aspect of the project debriefs is when things are going wrong, something has gone wrong. Every individual is asking themselves, "What could I have done to prevent that thing from happening?" Instead of focusing on who might have been the biggest problem during that specific situation.
Yeah, that's also part of the astronaut culture as well. At least the ideal astronaut culture is that when a mishap occurs, that everyone rushes in to take responsibility for it. You do not see that much on Earth, certainly not in the Canadian political world, where people always tend to distance themselves from anyone that makes a mistake. But it's the opposite in the astronaut culture. Something doesn't go wrong, it doesn't go right with a robotic task, and we all stop. It's not just the person with their hands on the controls. We stop and we think, well, what could I have done in order to have prevented that mishap from occurring? Perhaps I wasn't deeply involved in the task, but if I had gotten up a half hour earlier and I had reviewed the procedures with the operator, or briefed someone on my experiences during a earlier training session on the ground, that's something that I could have actually done. So it's important for everyone to, well, for each individual to embrace failure. Like I said a minute ago, it's part of what innovation is all about. And then also for the crew as a whole to take responsibility for the failure, take responsibility for the mistake, and then use it to the next time achieve a perfect or a degree of excellence.
And Bob, what that makes me think of too is that I think it's so critical for that to be the way we operate, because you're launching on a Soyuz or a space shuttle, and the alarm starts going off, and you get into the checklist, or you're in the bold face, the things we have to remember to do, and somebody makes a mistake. You don't have time to sit there and get all ticked off with yourself that you screwed up, get mad, not be able to continue. You have to be able to acknowledge this, and a mistake was made. Everybody acknowledges it, figures out how to move on past it, and then still successfully come out the other side. And then afterwards, you can come together and you can say, okay, we really need to pay attention when we do this again. Maybe the procedure's not written right, or Nicole, you just weren't paying attention, or whatever it was. You have to accept that something did go wrong, but you can't get buried in it while it's happening either, because you're only going to put yourself in the position for more and more to go wrong, for it to just kind of really cascade, versus, okay, screwed up. And if somebody doesn't see it, you've got to be willing to say too, hey, I threw the wrong switch, recovering this way, and get agreement and move on, because otherwise it just makes it even worse.
One of my astronaut role models, one of my Canadian mentors, is former Canadian astronaut Mark Garneau. And he once told me that the sign of the ultimate astronaut is how well you can recover from a mistake. And like Nicole's just said, we all make the mistakes. But if you make a mistake during one particular activity, you have to realize that, you got 6 other tasks to do later in the day, and you can't bring that screw up that you did at 10 a.m. in the morning to impact the next operations that you're doing later in the day. It's not fair to the principal investigators or the payload developers. So you have to get it out of your mind and then start afresh again.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much. Yeah, you've both been so generous with your time. Before we leave, though, just wanted to hear a bit about some of your current passions. And Nicole, yeah, please talk to us about the Space for Art and the Space for Art Foundation.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that opportunity. Yeah, I retired from NASA about 5 years ago now. I can't believe it's been that long. And when I had finally made that, and I think, Bob, I don't want to speak for you, but I think you'd agree. It's a difficult decision to make, right? To say, okay, I'm going to take myself out of line of flying in space again. I'm not going to work with these amazing people directly anymore. I'm not going to be able to go swim in the neutral buoyancy lab in a 300-pound spacesuit, those kinds of things. And so whatever I was going to do in this next mission in life, I really felt like it had to be meaningful, and it had to leverage all of this opportunity I'd had flying in space. And I'd had the chance to paint in space, which, as we discussed, I think art is this way it's to communicate with audiences that don't even know we have a space station, right? Bring them in through the art, whether they like it or not, and then tell the backstory. And people should know we have this space station and how we've been working there to improve life on Earth. And so in short, Space for Art Foundation, the way we like to say it is that we're uniting this planetary community of children through the awe and wonder of space exploration and the healing power of art. So we do space-themed art therapy projects is what we're doing. We've worked with kids now in over 50 countries, in hospitals and refugee centers and some rural schools around the world. And I'll tell you, it's pretty cool to see how space just has this sense of it that, these kids who are going through something I absolutely pray is the worst thing they ever have to deal with in their entire lives. And they come in, they sit up straighter, they're talking to the other kids around them, they're talking to me about their future. They're using space as a way to think about their own futures. And I just have found that that's, it's like I went to space to get to do this kind of thing now. And really excited about the opportunity that I have to do this. And Bob has been actively involved with some of the projects we've done. A couple of those suits have, the spacesuit that we've done have gone to the station, and we've been able to engage with the kids on the ground through the crews on orbit wearing the suits and showing them flying through the space station. And yeah, it's pretty incredible. So our next project that we're working on, another spacesuit, and I'll just throw a plug for our company, ILC Dover. ILC Dover is a company that makes our real spacesuits. They made the spacesuits that our astronauts use to walk on the moon. They made the spacesuits that we do our spacewalks in space now with. And they are making absolute best space suits for our future, but they have volunteered all along to be the ones that quilt together the kids' artwork into these suits for us.
Nice.
And yeah, we've got a new one in work that we're hopeful to get kids from every country on the planet involved. So if you know some people in other countries, let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Bob, you've been involved in a ton of things. One of them is Artemis 2 and kind of evangelizing that, and you have a passion for the next generation in space travel, right?
Yeah, so like Nicole, I've also retired from my space agency several years ago, but I still have the passion for space in my veins, so I stay engaged. The background imagery that I chose for today's event is not by accident. It's a lunar base. Yesterday, the government of Canada made a major announcement that they've just signed a treaty or an agreement with NASA, And it says that in return for Canada's contributions of robotics to the next major human endeavor in space, which is the Lunar Gateway, we will have 2 astronauts do flights to the moon. Artemis 2 is going to be the first habitated vehicle that will go to the moon and do an orbit around the moon, similar to the Apollo 8 mission, if you remember that. And then later on, another Canadian astronaut will visit the Gateway Station as well. Another project that I'm working on is investigating a potential deep space healthcare role for Canada when we go to an asteroid or to Mars. It's the kind of new competency area beyond robotics, which Canada is famous for, that I'm pretty excited about. Canada does a pretty good job of delivering remote healthcare to rural and remote regions of Canada. And I think we can exploit that to share with our partners, the operational and the infrastructure that's needed to take care of astronauts' health on deep space. So I'm leading a national task force on that that will hopefully have a hospital on the moon or on Mars with a Canadian flag on it. That'd be so cool.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah. Great. So we will have the links in the description, but for Nicole, the space4artfoundation.com would be a place to get more information about Space for Art and know how to contact Nicole. And Bob's website, robertthirsk.ca, is also a place where you can find out more information about that and reach out to Bob. Thanks so much. This has been a really great conversation, and I've learned a lot, and I know our audience will too. So thank you so much once again for coming on the show.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. Actually, we did have one pressing question, which has been on both Kevin and I's mind for quite a while. Does NASA or the CSA have a beard policy for astronauts?
I don't know.
Think, Nicole,
I don't know. They didn't disqualify me.
Because we haven't seen any beards in space.
We haven't seen any beards in space.
We're looking for beards in space, and they're just not there.
Yeah.
There have been beards in space, but not ZZ Top quality. I think just short beards. Yeah.
So there may be hope for us still.
Yeah, there's, you might have to fold it up. You got to get a good seal on your masks and stuff and your helmets. It looks good though.
Thank you.
That'll be fun. All right. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
See you on ArtStation.com, the global hub for creative professionals. You've been listening to the ArtStation podcast. Hit subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. And please leave a rating and review for the podcast. We promise we'll read them all. See you next time.